Welcome to Reels on the Rocks, the show where your hosts Whiskey and Sweet Tea discuss film from the unpretentious perspective. Whiskey and Sweet Tea's Lonely Hearts Club is back for another romance-filled month. We're keeping the love and longing going with Somewhere in Time. Don't forget to like, subscribe, hit that notification bell, and as always, please be advised that spoilers are ahead. Welcome, dear listeners, to the Grand Hotel.
Welcome.
Courtesy of your local time-traveling bed. Welcome back, listeners.
Oh, no,
We're back
Penny.
with another one of our timeless trysts for Whiskey and Sweet Tea's Lonely Hearts Club, month of Valentine's Day, month of love. I almost said December. I have no idea why.
But
it's been a weekend.
Time is like relative, man. It might be March, it might be...
Because we just found out in this thing, yeah, it is. But
the date is February 28th, 2025. The date is February 28th, yeah, anyway.
Oh my god, that's what I should have done. Anyway, so that being said, but before we get into today's movie pick as part of the Lonely Hearts Club, I understand, Whiskey, that you have a mini topic for us.
Yeah, so movie news has still been kind of slow. I don't know if everyone's just waiting on the Oscars. Frankly, the only movie news is like gossipy, we could have had fun. There's a lot of stuff still going on with It Ends With Us, and then there's some stuff constantly coming out about the star of Amelia Perez. But instead of doing that whole angle of things, I thought I'd kind of do sort of just a fun, chatty topic about something that is related tangentially to Lonely Hearts and people in the dating scene. And that's Zodiac signs, or, if you're the more cerebral kind, personality tests, but pretty much just things that make you compatible with someone arbitrarily based on a couple of letters or your star sign.
What did you find us?
A
movie Zodiac quiz?
Sort of. So I think I've talked about this on the show before, but I've toyed with this idea of a quote unquote movie Zodiac, right? Like, what are you based on? Like the movies that came out when you were born,
right?
And it's tough, right? Because like the Zodiac is, it's when you're born, you have a star sign, and that like dictates. What's tough is that like movies are constantly coming out, and also things like awards aren't done monthly, they're done yearly. So like what I have been doing for a couple of years, sort of what I've been calling a movie Zodiac, is based on 3 movies that came out the year you were born. And this is more of like a conversation starter if you're on a date with someone, pro tips with Whiskey if you're looking to break the ice. So the 3 movies for what I have been calling a movie Zodiac for the last couple of years. It's what was the highest grossing movie the year you came out, what was the best picture the year you came out, and what was the Disney film that was, the year you came out. So my movie Zodiac based on that, highest grossing would be Terminator 2, best picture would be Silence of the Lambs, and the Disney film would be Beauty and the Beast. So really good year for me, but I also asked T to just figure out what the 3 are for his birthday year. So what were your 3, T?
Okay, so I just wanted to, before I want to get a clarification for best picture. Do you want the best picture that was given in the year 1995, or from the following year for the movie that played during 1995? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. So I mean the year that the movie came out. So like, for instance, me, like Silence of the Lambs came out in 1991.
Yeah.
And same thing with Beauty and the Beast. So those Oscars would have been in like February, March of 1992, right?
Right.
So
okay. Cool. I wrote them both down.
When the movie came out.
I wrote them both down.
Gotcha.
Okay. So for best picture for me was Braveheart.
Nice.
Which I found out was the 9th Oscar film, 9th best picture film to not have any acting nominations but win best picture. Highest grossing was Batman Forever.
Oh, wow.
July's highest grossing was Apollo 13th. Oh my god. April. I'm sorry. That cracked me
Oh,
up.
and you're jumping ahead.
Oh, I'm
You're
sorry.
jumping
Okay,
ahead.
sorry. Okay, but the three. Okay, so we have Braveheart, Best Picture, highest grossing for the year, Batman Forever, and then Disney film. There was like three big ones that came out in that year
Oh,
in
wow.
'95. So I wrote them all down. I mean, there was lots, but the three big one, not lots, but there's smaller ones. But
Yeah, I usually just mean like what's the tentpole animation film, because I know there were probably other
okay,
Disney movies besides Beauty and the Beast, but
then
I mean, what were all three then?
Toy Story,
Okay.
Pocahontas, and a Goofy movie.
All very good. I'd say, like, based on the criteria I was thinking of, it probably would have been Pocahontas is
Yeah.
what I'm talking about.
Okay.
But all those are good. I mean, because like if I wanted to split hairs too, I could be like, well, technically Toy Story
He's a Pixar, yeah.
right? Because that was before. Fun fact, everybody. I know it probably just like feels like they're the same thing, but back in the day, Pixar, Disney was distributing their films, but they weren't. There was a whole era, like there was a time when Pixar was possibly splitting off from Disney, and it was like a weird time too because Disney was still putting out their films, but it was a whole thing before Disney bought Pixar and it became like their studio. That was a whole thing. So technically, even for that, that's already like a whole other thing.
Got it. So Pocahontas, by the way, that was a great story, Grandpa.
Right? No, and a Goofy movie. Goofy movie is great. I can't believe for some reason that always feels like it came out earlier than that year, but that's one of the earliest memories I have of going to the movie theater. By the way, is a Goofy movie.
See,
But so
I thought you were gonna tell me, you saw like Alien or something as your first film. Like you're so hardcore.
I
into
didn't watch
horror.
Alien when I was a little kid like you did somehow. No, but
Listen, it's less scary
so-
when you have a Pony Pals planner.
So the next thing, so that's what I would recommend if you're like on a date and you're with someone who likes movies. If you're a movie person, it's just a good way to break the ice. Learn if the person is within a reasonable age of
Yeah.
yourself. But so then I was like thinking, okay, well, wait a second, like the Zodiac's monthly, right? So like let's narrow it down a little bit more. So then I was like, okay, well, what about the month you were born? Like, what's the highest grossing? Because you can't do awards for that. So that's where I was like, oh, let's see. So you said it was Apollo 13.
Yes.
Again, really good. Mine is really funny, and I was kind of worried because Terminator 2 came out a month before I was born. And it was the highest grossing film the year I was born. So I was like, ooh, is it going to be one of those where it's still the number one at the box office?
Right.
But no, actually. So the month I was born, Hot Shots, which was a Top Gun spoof, was actually the highest grossing that month. So that's a fun one.
Oh
Right? I didn't even know it. I was like, Hot Shots, what is that? And then I saw it's like Charlie Sheen and Leslie Nielsen, and it's basically, Top Gun, but if it were like one of the Scary Movie spoofs or something. So, hey, that's a fun one. And Terminator 2 was number 2 that month. So at least I've got that going for me where that was going.
This is interesting because I told you mine, when I looked it up, mine was Apollo 13. Now, Apollo 13 came out at the end of June.
Okay.
Was not the highest grossing film of the year. It was number 2. And then I don't know how I got into this view. I somehow got into a view on Box Office Mojo where I was able to view the highest grossing per day. And every single day in July, it was April 13th. It was Apollo 13. I don't know why I keep saying it was Apollo 13.
It's a pretty famous movie.
And then I was like, but then I looked when did Batman Forever came out? I know it came out in June. It came out June 16th. So I'm just like, it must have like had like a long staying power then just in the theater because I don't think it earned like its entire thing in like those 2 weeks, So I just thought that was really interesting.
It's also like interesting, not even just on a getting to know a person kind of like Apollo 13 is one of those movies that's so classic that I know it came out in 95, but it feels like it came out in 85. You know what? Like the whole Houston, we have a problem.
Yeah,
like
classic line. Yeah,
and same thing like Batman Forever coming out the same year as like that movie or Toy Story. It just like it messes with your head a little bit because it's like and for some people listening to the show, I feel like our audience is kind of older based on the demographics we've seen, but like it's trippy too. Like if you're like a younger listener, I mean, all of this is like before you were born. I don't know. This is like old man fun stuff. But
well,
I feel
you know,
like it's
just funny because my dad's a big space nerd, so he like loves Apollo 13. So Apollo 13 was on all the time when I was a kid, and I remember because I got so tired of it. He had it on all the time. This is back when Laserdiscs were a thing. We had it on Laserdisc. He really liked this movie. Anyway, I remember telling him because I actually
Andy had a laser disc.
Oh my god, I know, right? We still have.
That's cool.
We still have them. But I remember telling him, I'm like, Dad, I think they're being a little over dramatic. Like, no one died. Like, it's fine. And he was not happy with me. But I was just
well, he's like, they didn't know they weren't gonna die. Like, obviously, we know that now.
No one died.
They can't see the future.
No, there's two scenes I always remember from that movie. One of them is the one where they dump everything on the table, like, okay, this is what they have free to use in the capsule. What can we make to help them breathe? That one, and the other one, I don't know why this one always fascinated me. This woman takes her like ring off in the shower and drops it down the drain and desperately tries to get it back, and she can't. Those two scenes are what always stand out to me in that movie. So, but yeah, I love that. That was me being a contrarian at age like 0 or whenever I started to form solid memories.
I gotta say, as someone who grew up with a laser disc in their household, how do you store those things in a closet?
Okay, so
they're like the size of a pizza,
right? I mean, like, okay, so they're basically like the way I think about it is they're basically just a little bit thicker than like a vinyl album. So we just had because like we had an entertainment center. I mean, it was old for back then. But like we would literally just have like a whole shelf and we just stood them all up on end down there. And
interesting.
So yes, that's how we stored them. We still have they live in boxes somewhere else. I can assure you I do have a laser disc commemorating the 50th anniversary of Gone with the Wind. When that came out on 2 discs, of course. It actually was a gift to my mom from my grandfather. But yeah, so we had, and I actually remember, okay, now we're talking about Laserdisc. I have to tell you this. I remember when Laserdisc were going out. It's like no one was going to do Laserdiscs anymore. I have a memory of my mom taking me to some random warehouse, like somewhere in our city. And it's like all the stores just sent their Laserdisc here for people to just like go through it. And it was like, like $1 or $2 or $3, for a Laserdisc. They're just trying to get rid of them. And I remember like, I walked out of there like I really, really wanted this one of Nutcracker the movie, and so we have this, and my mom was like, "Yeah, that was a bad movie." I'm like, "Well, when I was like 3 or however, it just looked like it was pretty. Okay, leave me alone." But we also got several episodes of the X-Files in Laserdisc too, so that's fun. But yeah, it's all fun.
I didn't even know there was a Nutcracker movie. I knew that there was like I had one as a kid on VHS that was like a ballet, and Macaulay Culkin was in it, which was kind of funny. But I didn't know there was a Nutcracker movie.
And then what was the other thing I could think of? We have the original cut of the original trilogy of Star Wars on Laserdisc. So that was before they did any of the retooling or adding stuff. So we consider that the pure copy because it's basically the closest thing of theatrical release.
I'm actually surprised that Gone with the Wind isn't on 4 of those things. Like a normal movie is like 2 or 3 discs.
Well,
so
to be fair,
a little bit longer.
They're front and back, like a regular
Fair
vinyl
enough.
album. So I guess if you think about it, it is 4 discs, just front and back.
I guess you're right. I still could have sworn that like Indiana Jones had 2 discs, but I also never owned one.
We also have the first DVD pressing of Gone with the Wind. Well, at least when it first came out, because it was like one of like 10 movies that was first released on DVD, or something like that. And even that DVD, it was only front and back.
See, but a DVD makes more sense.
That's true.
Because like, the Lord of the Rings extended cuts are just, front and back on DVDs and stuff. So,
and then
but back on that. So
we just keep going on Laserdiscs.
Back on track. Hey, this could be a topic for another time. Laserdiscs are interesting, and again, we have kind of an older audience, but for anyone who's younger who has no idea what the hell we're talking about, every generation of home video, there's always 2 formats that go to war, and whichever one the pornography industry adopts ends up being the one that people go with. Are you serious?
That's what decides it?
Yeah, it literally is. It's the same thing with Blu-rays and HD DVDs. Porn went with Blu-ray, so it's like a whole topic. But yeah, with Laserdisc, which frankly, you knew it was going to go with DVD, because imagine trying to have like a porn Laserdisc. Keeping that discreet in your household.
You can't hide that.
Imagine.
I think at one time it was called Disco Vision.
Right? So yeah, the fun fact that always, so far they haven't really been able, they attempted to do 8K a few years ago, and that just did not work out. But if somehow in the future they come up with something better than like a 4K DVD that people actually want to buy, and then someone has like a different version of it, look out for whichever one the porn industry is going with, because that's the one that'll actually be, widely available. But this is such a weird topic, like the whole movie Zodiac thing. Obviously, when I searched this, most of what was coming up was just articles about the film that we already reviewed, and you should all have listened to if you haven't already. But I did get a couple of articles that were not doing what I'm doing. I think I have a wholly original idea, and anyone listening could maybe even riff off of it, because I think it's a fun idea. What's your movie sign, so to speak? What's the name of that personality test everyone cares about nowadays?
The one where it's like, I have a type AQC personality, whatever that is thing.
Exactly. Same idea. I think that's a wholly original idea, and I'm sure someone could do a better version of it than me. But so far, I feel like, whatever was the top grossing the month of your birthday year, or those three that I was talking about, are at least a good conversation piece if you're on a date with someone. But I got two articles that were kind of interesting, where it was more that they were recommending what movies are so you based on your zodiac sign.
Okay.
And I know you're a Leo, so I threw both of these, and I just want to see what you think as a Leo about what movies they picked. So the first one was from a blog site, I believe it's a blog site called A Rabbit's Foot, and they just picked one movie. And you and I got both some classic ones.
Okay.
So for you, they think that the most Leo film for you would be The Picture of Dorian Gray from 1945.
Ooh, okay. I can vibe with that.
So what are your thoughts on that?
So I haven't seen that. I know kind of the story of Picture of Dorian Gray, and I'm pretty sure if I remember correctly, there's some queer theming in it. So I'm very excited now to watch this thing. I mean, I always like classic movies, but I'm very excited to see how this plays out. I could very easily see that it's a classic. It's mysterious. I think there's a queer theming in it. I have very good feelings about that.
You don't know much about the story, then?
I don't. Well, sort of. I mean, I think. Hang on. That sounds really bad. If I remember, well, because I know
about
the novel,
a very.
But go on, yeah.
So it's about a very hedonistic man who sells his soul to the literal devil so that he can always be young and beautiful, and all of his sin will be put onto this photo that he can, or not photo, portrait, like a painting, and he can never look at the painting, but the more horrible sins he commits, the uglier the painting gets, to the point where it's just horrifically scary looking. But he can never see what it looks like, or else he would break the contract, and he would die and go to hell, essentially. So I think they're kind of leaning on this, because there's every star sign has their toxic traits, right? And for Leos, I guess it's that you're kind of selfish and dramatic
and vain,
and I guess that's kind of what I guess that's what they were kind of going for with that.
Actually, I'd be fine with that. Okay, now tell me about yours.
So mine from A Rabbit's Foot, and I'm noticing we'll keep going with this, but something I found very funny, both with the top grossing the month I was born, and just what movie sites think of as Virgo movies. I keep getting comedies. So for me, it was The Philadelphia Story, which is a screwball rom-com kind of thing. And we'll link to these articles. Like, I forget if Spotify or anything has like links or whatever, but if you're listening to this on YouTube Music, like we'll have a link in the description because these are interesting articles, and there was more to it. There was like a whole paragraph explaining the reasoning for why these movies were picked. But it was all about like Katharine Hepburn and she, like the person writing was so sure she was a Virgo and then found out she was a Taurus in real life, but believed the character she played in the Philadelphia story was such a Virgo character, and ends up getting back with her husband, which is such a Virgo move. So, but I'm just noticing it's funny, and I actually haven't seen the Philadelphia story, but the fact that it's a screwball comedy from the 40s, I'm pretty interested. Also, my friend Joe, who sometimes listens to the show, so hey Joe, if you are listening, like a month ago had just watched this and it said it blew him away. So adding it to my list in general, because it's apparently a very me movie.
Well, the AFI listed as it's in the top 10. I think it's in the top 10 of romantic comedies of all time.
I mean, it's supposed to. I like screwball comedies from that era. It Happened One Night, all that sort of stuff. We talked a bit about screwball comedies once with our review of Paper Moon, and another time way back when we reviewed Dumb and Dumber, which I still kind of believe that's like a 90s take on a screwball comedy. But I like that era. Like, I say that romantic comedies are kind of one of my least favorite genres, but that era, like the screwball style rom-com, I really like. There was another one I remember watching for a class in high school where there was like a panther. I cannot remember. It was because it was for an adaptation class, and we read the short story it was based on. But it's like this couple, and they somehow mistakenly got like a panther sent to them, and it's like a tame panther, and it's this whole thing. And I need to look that one up because I enjoyed that one too. But yeah, so slow movie news, nothing too exciting happening outside of just some drama. I frankly feel like the news of the world is eclipsing any entertainment news that could be coming out. So I just thought this was like a fun thing I've kind of talked about here and there, either on the show or with you, or even like with my friend groups and stuff. It's a fun idea. I think someone could probably come up with a better version of it than me, but if anyone is listening to the show, has trouble having conversations with people, or just want to have like a fun idea of something to talk about, and you and the person you're with are both into movies, what's your movie zodiac?
Right.
What's your movie sign?
We should make this a thing.
We'll see.
So, just to have fun, which zodiac sign would be the most useless in a horror movie? This is an article by the Times of India. So let's just do.
Oh my god.
Let's just do ours. So you are a Virgo.
I'm a Virgo,
okay.
And I feel like I'm gonna be the winner here, the worst person to because.
Well, the first
that's
one,
another thing I have a problem with was.
Go ahead.
Well, actually, I might even be the final girl. Like, the thing with Virgos, everyone always makes the joke, like, oh, you're the virgin, you're the goody two-shoes, that's... It's always more complicated than that. Same thing with Leos, right? Like, you're supposed to be very, like, conceited and dramatic and self-centered and stuff, but like there's more to it than that,
Right.
So I always feel like Virgos, I feel like with me, I'm either going to be useless in a horror movie, or I'm going to be the final girl, because that's the thing, like, oh, the virgin is the one who survives. You're every time, so
you're the pure survivor. So they divide in 3 sections. The first to go, who has no survival instincts whatsoever, is Pisces and Libra and Gemini.
That makes sense.
The one who makes everything worse
makes sense
is Cancer, Taurus, Sagittarius. The one who tries but fails spectacularly, Aries. Okay, then here's me, Leo. Too busy making dramatic speeches about heroism to notice the villain sneaking up from behind. Would make sure their final words were iconic, though. Yeah, they would be. And then Aquarius. Okay, the ones who actually have a chance. Here we go. Scorpio, Capricorn, and Virgo figures out the villain's pattern, sets up traps, and organizes an escape plan with military precision. So, according to the Times of India, you are the final girl who gets everything, makes it all happen. You're the Fred of the group,
basically. As I said, the stereotype in slashers is that the virgin girl is the one who gets out. So I was thinking, oh, that's probably going to be what they label the Virgo as. I do like where they put you at, though. What I was going to say, for you, I could imagine you'd get the scene where it looks like you're right about to escape, and then something unfortunate happens. Maybe the killer doesn't even get to you. Like, you're, like, out on the road trying to wave down a car, and then someone just hits you with a car or something. I feel like you'd get really close, and then something would happen.
Okay. Why do I feel like what you just described is in... Oh, my God. I always get their names backwards. The horror movie we watched with the cabin and the two guys.
Is
Tucker and Dale or Dale and Tucker?
Oh, Tucker and Dale.
So Tucker and Dale. I feel like what you just described is when that cop comes in and then like leans on the post and then.
That is exactly what I'm talking about.
Unrelated to
obviously
the
in that movie,
killer,
there's no...
but
yeah,
tried their best.
That's what I mean. I was thinking in the sense that there actually was a killer out to get everybody, but same idea. Where
General
it's like,
premise.
because actually that is perfect, because he was also about to figure out that they were harmless when that happened.
Right.
Because he was like, that was right when he's like, oh, you're not murdering these people. Like, they're just idiots and hurting themselves. And then he leaned on the post and got his head blown off.
Right.
Yeah, no, same idea.
Same idea.
But this is, here we go. Like, apparently there's all sorts of fun movie publications with this idea. So I'm not the only one who's had it. But as I said, it's a fun talking point for a date, especially if you're both cinephiles. So go crazy with this idea. I just thought I'd actually have a segment to talk about it, because I feel like I've brought it up in past episodes. I definitely know I've talked about this with like friends outside of the show. But it's just a fun idea. But let's get into the meat of the episode.
Exactly.
And what are you drinking?
Okay.
T?
So I looked up this cocktail. I was trying to find something timely. Okay, so I don't know if this is a real cocktail or not, but I found this on a website called Cocktail Virgin Slut. And it's called...
What a website, Tim.
I know.
Jeez.
And it's called The Time Traveler. It has gin, Marciano liqueur, Saint Germain, and lemon juice. It's quite tasty.
Very nice. I was, I ended up watching this 2 nights ago. I wanted to make sure I had my my drink plan ahead, so I didn't actually... I could have planned ahead or after, because I did get my alcohol yesterday, so I could have done it. But anyway, I actually saw that cocktail because I was looking it up initially, just to be like, is there a cocktail in this movie? And a bunch of versions of that cocktail came up.
Okay.
But considering after watching the movie, there wasn't... Because I thought that cocktail was like from the movie. It's not. There's no cocktail in this movie. This is unlike Zodiac, where there just happened to be a fun
Aqua
blue
Velva
cocktail. There's basically nothing like that in this movie. So I just went with a rosé. I feel like wine is a good kind of theme for the month of love, and rosé is usually what people are drinking on Valentine's Day. So, but I've got a fancy one. Let me get the bottle here. Of course. Goodness. Okay. So, of course, I put it where I couldn't reach it as soon as I sat down. So, I actually have a French rosé. It's Chateau de Beaupré. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly. Couture d'Aille en Provence.
Oh, wait. Is that the one that's shaped like a rose? The bottom of it?
No. Just a normal bottle. It's got like a photo, or like, a black and white rendering of some kind of winery out on the thing. It's from France, and it's a 2023. Yeah, a lot of it is in French. So it's a rosé from France, and I'm being a little extra fancy. It wasn't. It's funny. I was fancy with both episodes this year, because I also did the Coppola Diamond Black Label wine for the last episode. Neither of them were that expensive. I feel like the Coppola one was like $20, and this is like $15. So, I guess you don't need to spend that much to be fancy.
Well, supposedly he sold off sections of his winery to help finance Megalopolis. So,
there you go.
That might be the end of an era for that. I don't know.
Well, it'll probably just have his name on it. You know, it's the
They buy the name.
couple of exactly.
It's white labeled.
And I never got to say, so it was pretty good. This is pretty good as well. But
I love rosé.
Let's get into this. I'll let you introduce everything, but like I said in a message, T has this supernatural ability to randomly pick a movie that actually kind of pairs super well with my pick without having seen my movie. Because, you know, I have never seen this movie. He's never seen Bram Stoker's Dracula.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll get into it as we talk about the movie, but like this has so many similarities.
I'm eager to hear the similarities you picked up on.
Yes. So without further ado, get into it.
Okay. So this is 1980s classic, Somewhere in Time. We have a lovely cast here: Christopher Reeve as Richard Collier, Jane Seymour as Elise McKenna, Christopher Plummer as William Fawcett Robinson, and Bill Irwin as Arthur. I do not know how to pronounce his last name. Actually, I just can't read my handwriting. But we've been through this. This is like everyone take a shot when I can't read my handwriting at this point. Directed by, and this was actually kind of a sad coincidence. Directed by Jean Swark. I can't pronounce his last name. He is a French director, so your wine that's very French works. But he passed away last month. In January.
We're a month late.
I know, but you know, we're honoring him. I mean, I feel like he would appreciate this being played in the month of love.
I will remember you.
Oh my god, okay. Already, I think he got into the wine.
Remember me.
I think he got into the wine before the show. You would also know his work. He directed Jaws 2. And Santa Claus the movie.
Wow.
He also did lots of TV. He did several episodes of Castle, Cold Case, Rockford Files. He was a busy worker. The screenplay was written by Richard Matheson, who also wrote the book that it's based on, but we'll get to that in a minute. He's also notable for writing the novel that I Am Legend is based on, as well as the screenplay for I Am Legend, What Dreams May Come, Jaws 3D, 16 episodes of The Twilight Zone, an episode of Star Trek. I could go on. Very prolific. It was adapted from his book. Bid Fair Return or Bid Time Return. Again, handwriting by Richard Matheson. Cinematography was by Isidore. I want to say it's Markovsky, I think. He did the Muppet movie, the remake of The Jazz Singer, Burning Bed, Skin Deep. Again, also long-time worker. And the music was by John Barry. He scored 11 James Bond films. Midnight Cowboy. He did the Oscar-winning score for Dances with Wolves. He also did a rejected score for The Incredibles. And this one in here because I remember this movie. My brother was obsessed with it. He was a rejected score also for Thomas the Magic Railroad, but did a lot of stuff. I think, I could be wrong, but I think what I had read was he actually did come up with the iconic James Bond theme. That was him, I believe. But he did the score for this, and that's important, and we'll come back to that later. This movie had a budget of $4 million, box office of only $9.7 million. Its reception on Rotten Tomatoes is 52%, and Metacritic is a 2.9. Oh no, I'm sorry, not 2.9, 29.
Whoa,
sorry. 29, not that bad. Not that bad. I realized when I read it that was wrong. You were like, oh my god. Award-wise, it won 3 Saturn Awards for Best Costume, Best Music, and Best Fantasy Film. And it was nominated for an Academy Award for Best Costume Design for Jean-Pierre Dorliac. It was not nominated for Best Score, and we will come back to that. Again, it was also nominated to be featured on the AFI's 100 Passions, 100 Years of Film, for the 100 Years of Passion, and then 100 Years Film Score. Now the reason I keep referencing the film score is one of the standout things from this movie. I don't know if you picked it up. Is this score? This score when this movie, not when it hit theaters, and we'll talk about why there was an issue at theaters, but when it was first shown on TV, this score blew up. They were so underwhelmed with any pressings they'd put out, and they'd gotten so many requests from record stores that they ended up pressing 500,000 more copies of this score. This score was huge. It was everywhere. It was the most requested songs at weddings for like the next decade. This was a big deal score. And it's actually, and like AFI recognized it later because they was nominated for this, but it's very interesting that a score as iconic as this one was not even nominated. But we've talked about before sometimes how short-sighted the Academy is. So, it's like surprising, but at the same time not surprising. But I want to ask you this, because you've never seen this film before. Had you heard of it?
Oh, yeah. I did not know what it was about, but like it's one of those movies that's somewhere in time. It's like a really known title. But it's funny. I assumed it was a more recent film when I saw that it was 1980 and
I know you clarified.
Christopher Reeve. Yeah, like when I saw when it actually came out and Christopher Reeve was in it and all this, I was like, oh, whoa! I thought this was like, so like one movie you talked about possibly doing for this pairing was like The Lake House. I was thinking it was much more contemporary, like around that time or something.
Right.
So.
Well,
Finding out the time period makes sense because of how classic it is. Again, this is like one of those, I didn't even know what it was about, but I, was aware of it. So yes, I had heard of this. I feel like it's one of those where if you haven't at least heard the title somewhere, you live under a rock or in some commune somewhere out in the middle of nowhere,
right,
where you have like, 5 wives or you're one of 5 wives.
Right.
But no, and it's funny. So you mentioned like the score is one of the things that stuck out to me. Mm-hmm. You're going to be happy to know I enjoyed watching this quite a bit.
Yay.
And the score was something that stood out to me. And one thing, I'm sure T was going to get to it later, but T wanted to make sure for my homework that I watched a specific episode of American Dad.
Yes. Full transparency, we had a mix up that I apologize for.
It's whatever. I enjoy
get to it,
American Dad is I for whatever reason, I don't like Family Guy, but I like American Dad, so it's fine. I just watched another episode of a cartoon show. But I had seen the episode that you were referencing, and I knew while I was watching the film, I was like, I've seen this parodied somewhere. I don't know what show. I was guessing it was probably Family Guy or American Dad, because they do a lot of TV show parodies. Maybe it was The Simpsons. I knew I had seen this premise
somewhere
mocked somewhere, and sure enough, as soon as I watched the episode that you told me to watch, I was like, oh yeah, I remember this one. It's but I noticed when Steve is looking at the painting in the episode, it is the music, it is the score. Yes. From Somewhere in Time. So like they had to use the actual music just to
really
in case
sell
you
it
didn't
home.
Get the joke. In case you didn't understand what movie they were making fun of.
Yeah.
No, but yeah, so yes, I had heard of it.
Oh, good. Okay. See, well, two things. I'm glad you really enjoyed watching this movie. I was concerned if you hadn't heard of it that you're going to watch it and be like, oh, it's like I was worried you were going to think it was too Hallmarky or something like that.
So it is, like, I'm not going to say it's a perfect movie. Like, just because it's Hallmarky is not going to completely turn me off. If anything, I thought it was just a little disappointing that some aspects of the production felt cheaper than others. Right. You know what I mean? Like, I thought the music was really good. I could see someone saying it's a little sappy sounding, but it's, emotional enough. Aspects of it kind of felt classic.
Yeah.
So it didn't bother me that much, but there were like things about some of like the I don't even know. That's the thing. I don't know if it's the cinematography. Obviously, like the costume design was nominated for an Oscar. So, and I don't even think it was the costume. There was something about it that felt cheaper than like a theatrical film. And it's funny because you just listed off some other films. One thing I was going to ask you at some point, but you answered it for me in explaining all of the background for the film. Like, this director has made some other films, and like I actually think Jaws 2 is okay, not as good as the original. And some of the other ones you listed are like really solid movies. So there was something like cheap about the production that I can't quite put my finger on that made it feel like a TV movie, but not for
right
the you know what I mean? Like,
I know exactly
I'm not
what
trying
you're talking
to
about.
yeah, I'm not trying to like diss anybody on the team, but there's something about it that felt like it was a TV movie rather than like a full-on movie. And that's like the big thing that bothered me the most about it. There's like little nitpicky things that I think it's more of a me problem, and I'm not going to chalk up against the movie. And some of it is stuff that I actually think is comparable to the last film we just reviewed. One thing that I think is kind of intentional is it is almost funny how quickly Richard just falls in love with this woman for no reason.
Right.
Other than just seeing. And as I was watching that, I was like, okay, this is something I'm going to critique, but at the same time, the same thing is happening in Dracula. Like, we just reviewed Dracula, so I'm not going to harp on it too much. But the romance is between Mina and Dracula, and they also have like this weird connection when first meeting that might feel kind of unearned. And so in Dracula, we didn't really touch on this, but I'm sure it was obvious to you that Mina was supposed to be like the reincarnation of his dead wife. Right?
Yeah,
like
that was the vibe that I kind of took away.
So in the same way, this film feels very fatalistic.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to knock that as a point against it, because I think, like, as absurd as it is that this guy fell so hard for this random woman, that he is like devoting his life to time traveling to be with her.
Right.
I feel like in the same way, like with Dracula, there's kind of this leap in logic you need to make about magic soul shifting into other bodies.
Right.
Like, I feel like they were meant to be together. And I think that's also like what's really emotionally resonant with this film. Like, it's not supposed to be logical. It's just like they were meant for each other, and they're not from the right time period.
Right.
And so they are like drawn to each other. Because it's the same way when he goes back in time, she is just automatically kind of in love with him. She even says like, "Are you the one?" And we find out what that means later.
Yeah.
But so that's like a thing I will point out. I could see definitely bothering some people, and I definitely think it's a weaker aspect of the narrative, in my opinion. But I don't think that it is unintentional, or like that the writer didn't think about that. I think it is like a choice being made about the story being told. Like, this is about two people who should be together but are tragically from different time periods.
Right. And, like you just talked about with, if you stop and think about it too long, the premise is absurd. But I do think one of the smart choices that was made, either on the screenwriter's part or on the editing part, was to keep it like it's like a little bit over 90 minutes. Like, it's short enough that you don't like you're trying to say, it's like you don't like get bored enough to start questioning things. You know what I mean? Like, it keeps it keeps it short enough to where you can just like buy into it for the story. And because I think because for some reason I remember it being longer. I don't know why I did. But I was like, oh yeah, this is fine. I was like, because for some reason I thought it was like a 2.5 hour movie. I don't know why. Because I've seen this before, but I was just like, oh, you think this will be too long for him? Oh no, it's not. It's fine. But I do think that I do think in this particular case, the timing, like you said, with the specific premise that they set up, is very, very important. I mean, a lot of this movie revolves around time, concept time, all that fun stuff. And I do think the timing was very intentional. It's just long enough for you to believe that something like this is possible, and like ultimately find out that it's not, in reality at least.
Yeah. And it at least does its due diligence. Time travel is one of those things in screenwriting, whenever you're dealing with a fantastical element, you gotta explain the rules, right?
Yeah.
That's, classic example, Back to the Future. There's the whole thing where Doc Brown is showing Marty how the time machine works, and that is for the audience's benefit so that they understand the rules. You need to hit 88 miles an hour. You need some plutonium. You need to generate this much electricity.
Right.
And yada, yada, yada. Like, they understand how that works. And this movie does do that perfectly well. Like, as weird of a premise as it is, and as disappointing as it is that he doesn't have a neat time machine to go back to 1912, like, this weird hypnosis time travel that he does is explained great by the college professor he talks to. And there are rules, and the rules come into play quite a bit at the very end of the movie as well. But, like, you have to completely dissociate yourself from the time period. You have to be wearing period appropriate clothing. You can't have anything from your time period on you. And I actually thought it was funny. I felt stupid because he's like, why isn't this working? And then he realizes I'm listening to a tape recorder of myself talking. These didn't exist.
Yeah.
I felt stupid when he made that realization, because I realized, oh yeah. And you know what was driving me crazy in that scene is that there are two light fixtures attached to the bed that are so 80s.
Right.
And I was like, throw those out. Throw those out. Those do not look right. And sure enough, they weren't there when he woke up. But yeah, like, it's a weird premise, but I think they do a good job explaining it. And no, I don't think the movie, that frankly, the fact it's like a tight 90 minutes, it actually feels like it could have been longer, to be honest. It didn't really feel like it was outdoing its, or outstaying its welcome or anything like that.
Right. Well, it also, the fact that being 90 minutes, it also, like you said, the fact that you're like, I feel like there could be more. I think that's the point. Because, like, if you really think about it, in the grand scheme of things, he was only with her for such a short time. And yet she was left longing for him, like, until her death. And so, it's almost like the fact that we say that there could be more, there could be this, it's just so intentional to get us to feel, or at least get us as close as possible to feeling what these characters are feeling in this film. And I thought that was excellent work done by the screenwriter. I mean, of course, he is also adapting his own book, but I don't know, just like it's stuff like this that I think makes all sorts of filmmaking interesting. Like, it's stuff that you do, like we sit there, we talk all the time about, cinematography, lighting, set, acting, standing, blocking, all that fun stuff. But then it was like this movie that is basically about time used its runtime to kind of hammer home the point of the story. And I think that's pretty impressive.
That's a very astute observation. Where did you get it from? No.
I actually like just came up with that as you were saying that, when you talked about that. And I was
how did you plagiarize that? No.
Oh my God.
Well, I'll get into, let me go into the similarities, since I touched on that. So there's a few things. I mentioned Dracula. This will be the last time I mentioned Dracula, so we can move on and just talk about this movie. But first similarity I noticed is that both movies were kind of about a doomed romance.
Yeah.
With Dracula, it's the whole backstory is his wife, committed sewer slide, jumped off the tallest tower, and then was reincarnated hundreds of years later as a different person, and they are never really together and all that. And this is two people who never really end up together and are from two different time periods and never should have even met each other to begin with.
Right.
So both doomed romances. Second thing, which is even more cemented now that you've explained what it was, but so like going into this, like I watched this one on Amazon and it had the little thing like Oscar nominated film. I was like, what? I didn't know this was Oscar nominated, just like the film that we just talked about, Dracula. And not only that, but you have clarified that they were nominated for the same Academy Award, and Dracula won Best Costume.
Right.
And this one didn't win, but they were both nominated for Best Costume, so other similarity it has. And there's more than that.
How dare you
We'll
forget
move
this?
on. Right. I'll probably think of the other similarities, but those were like the two big glaring things. I think the other one was, like I said, both movies have kind of a leap in logic you need to make about, like, you know, how they fell in love. What I already explained that.
Well,
But
what's interesting, and I just thought of this too. Like you said, the leap in logic. If you think about what their method is for time travel, it's so simple, but it's, I mean, like relatively, like when you put thinking about machines and quantum physics and quantum mechanics and all that fun stuff, this one's a relatively simple premise, and it almost makes it more believable. But what's interesting about this method is, much like, as we've all in lives, this is our Lonely Hearts Club, we've all had our hearts broken. We've all believed, if we just, maybe believe enough in this love, we can make it happen, which is essentially what a very simplified way of saying what their time travel method is like, if you just believe that you are there, your mind will do the work and make it happen. And and like, ultimately, much like a romance that is doomed, this way of time travel, it's not perfect. It's not, you can't stay there forever, as we learn. I mean, to be fair, he did make a mistake by bringing that penny with him, but I think the point still stands the same. I also think that was intentional.
Well, and so what I would argue is that any time travel movie has a silly because any machine that can send you through time is kind of, time travel is one of those things, the more I think about it, the more I'm like, I'm pretty sure it's impossible, because it would just destroy the fabric of reality if it were possible. Like, even someone with the best intentions, like, who knows, maybe I'm wrong. I'm not a quantum physicist, so, like, I'm not going to attack the whole weird meditation style of time travel in this movie, because frankly, it's just as silly as the DeLorean and Back to the Future, or the phone booth in Bill and Ted, or the whirligig thingamadooey that's from, like, the H.G. Wells time machine. Like, they're all silly because the premise is kind of ridiculous on its face, no matter how much you try and make it logical. The jump in logic I was talking about, though, was just the love at first sight kind of thing. It didn't bother me so much in this. I really like romances where the romance is earned.
Right.
One thing I noticed before I started watching this, you mentioned all of the kind of bad reviews it got. I saw that going into it, and I was like, is this going to be extra hokey or something? Like, what I was expecting, especially as I was watching it, I was kind of like, I wonder if this was like The Notebook of its time, where, like, The Notebook is not a bad movie, but it has this reputation of, like, oh, if you're a boyfriend being drugged in The Notebook, you're gonna hate it. And I, when I was eventually made to watch The Notebook by someone I was dating, it was fine. But I'll use that as, like, a positive example, because Ryan Gosling's character in that movie works for that relationship.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? There's, like, a wooing. And that's the leap in logic I was saying that both films shared, because both in Dracula and in this, there's just sort of a love at first sight thing that is the leap in logic I'm making, like, where it's like, well, why do they love each other immediately?
Right.
And again, in this film, I feel like it's a fate thing. In that film, it's like a reincarnated soul thing.
Yeah.
But that's like a thing I would normally probably harp on as weak writing, but in this film, I felt like it was very thematic. But as I said, for my personal taste, like, the types of romance movies I really like, Titanic is another example. I really like it when there is, like, an effort made to make the person fall in love with them, because then you care more. When there's just sort of this Romeo and Juliet, I saw your face and I fell in love. Like, I'm sure that plays well for some people, but for a cynical realist like myself, I'm just like, nope. Nope.
You're like, no.
But again, I feel like that, like, it's intentional with this story, and just with the fate kind of theme going on and everything.
Well, yeah, and I think you're right about fate being one of the main themes, as opposed to, like you were talking about with Dracula. And one of the things I do like is before he gives up, he's able to drag out the old registrar from 1912 to like, did I make this happen? Should I stop now? Or was I successful? And he finds his name in there. So he was clearly successful at going back in time. So I really did like that. And you know, really kind of that really sort of, you know, it's one of those people might be like, well, technically in time travel. Well, the point is he was fated to go back and meet her, if not make it work for the time being. But like you mentioned, this did not get good reviews when it came out. We talked about its Rotten Tomato score. We talked about its Metacritic score being so low. According to Wikipedia, reviews called the film, quote, a superficial tearjerker, end quote, and horrible, quote. Which I think is pretty harsh. But when this movie hit TV, it blew up. And there was actually an interview with Jane Seymour. This is like one of the main factors. I don't know if you remember another major film that came out in 1980. If you could think of one, do any come to mind?
Is it a romance film?
It was not a romance film, but it was also by Universal.
Ooh, Universal, 1980.
Oh, and there was also another major. Go on.
Wait, say it.
I was saying there was also another major 1980 event that happened as well. But first, we'll focus on the movie.
Oh,
It's a classic.
Gonna hate myself for not. I'm sure it is, and I'm gonna be annoyed that I wasn't able to guess it. What genre? And it's a romance, you said?
No, it's not a romance. It's a comedy.
It's a comedy in 1980. Oh, is this Arthur that we reviewed last year?
Not Arthur. We have not reviewed it. Classic film.
I'm gonna say I can't guess. What is it?
The Blues Brothers.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
So according to an interview that Jane Seymour did with Turner Classic Movies, this is all coming from the Wikipedia article, she said that Universal had put so much money into, or not so much money, they'd spent a lot basically on Blues Brothers, and they were very concerned they were not going to get a return on their investment, that they like focused completely on advertising the Blues Brothers and kind of just left them, you know, off to die. They only spent like, I think like $2 million in advertising, which, you know, is like not a lot.
Yeah, and I if anyone has seen the Blues Brothers, that movie was like, Jesus, that movie must have been, because you've got all the musical acts, you've got all the car crashes.
Yeah.
Like that movie had to have been stupid expensive to make, to be honest. Like that's something that was in my mind when I finally actually sat down and watched it. So I could believe that, to be honest. So
yes,
especially because this movie would have been very cheap to make in comparison.
Right. And I do feel like, she doesn't say this, but like you talked about, there's something about it that looks, and I kind of think there was maybe some After Effects work that was done to really kind of sell like the older thing, like, because when he does go back in time, the coloring to me does appear a bit different. And
it does.
I think they may have done something, and I think that kind of made it look a bit cheaper. And maybe they also didn't have the best budget, because, and then I was like, oh my God, I remember the first time I saw this, I was like, oh my God, they had like no budget when they made this, because when he first gets there, like that room is like so depressing. I was like, I thought this was the Grand Hotel. And the point was basically just, you know, to differentiate modern minimalism from the, you know, eccentric and ornateness of times of old. So that was happening. And then she also said that she and Christopher Reeves couldn't even like promote the movie because there was also a strike from the Screen Actors Guild going on at the same time. So they literally could only depend on whatever advertising Universal put out. And they did like nothing. So that was a huge thing. I mean, that doesn't explain the bad reviews, but that explains the poor box office performance, because the fact that like once it hit TV, everybody was like obsessed. And like I said, the soundtrack blew up, the movie blew up. Then you know, that's when, you know, people kind of started watching it. And I think it's like one of these movies that over time critics have changed. It's like, I think they also went into it thinking it was just a low budget romance, didn't even take it seriously, or maybe even review it seriously. Like it was just something they had to do, you know? So
There's also like reviewing things in good faith. Like, so I'm giving the movie a lot of credit because a lot of the things I have a problem with are things that I think are addressed with the themes of the film.
right,
You know, critics at the time, like if you're paid by a newspaper to go watch a movie and it might not be your cup of tea or something, like as I said, the whole falling in love at first sight thing, I could see really getting on someone's nerves or thinking that like the movie's extra hokey about it and stuff. And there is like one thing I do find kind of funny, especially with Christopher Reeves just having come off of being Superman for, and probably still, because I think the last Superman movie came out in 84 or something. So maybe it was 89, whatever. He was still Superman. So
right.
like coming off of that, and the way he plays Richard is so dopey. He's such like a bumbling idiot for so much of the movie.
Right.
So honestly, like that's another kind of funny thing with you could argue like, how did she fall in love with this guy? He seems like a dope. And I don't know, like I kind of see where the critics are coming from, but there's like a harshness to it that I'm guessing just comes from the fact that a lot of movie critics, you know, you're just being hired by a publication to cover a movie. Like, oh, you got to go see Somewhere in Time and have it up by Sunday, you know,
right?
So we could put it out. Because yeah, like this movie is very cheesy. There is a Lifetime movie kind of quality to it, and that also makes it make sense that it played super well on TV. Because like I said, it felt kind of like a TV movie. And I did notice what you were talking about, the color. I got mixed feelings because I like that I could tell the difference between the time periods. I also like that there is a love for 1912 because I know what you mean about the hotel when he gets there.
Yeah.
But I also feel like there's sort of an idealistic view of the time period he's going with, partly from his own feelings.
Yeah.
Being expressed in the film, because when he goes back in time, the rooms are much more grand. There's a lot more color saturation in the actual film, and there's just sort of a magical quality to the time period he's in. And I know what you mean. Like I can't tell if that's what makes it feel cheap. I at least like that there was an effort made to make the time periods feel different.
Yeah.
Tangibly, without you needing to like you can tell that he's in a different time period without it being explained to you. So I do appreciate that, and I do think that there is some thought being put into the cinematography.
Right. Now, what I was gonna say next is this. Like I said, this blew up on TV. It has a cult following. So much so, like, first off, the Grand Hotel, is a real hotel in Michigan. It is called the Grand Hotel, and they do host a yearly Somewhere in Time based, not like con, but like, you know, like people go to like those Bridgerton balls. It's kind of like that. Except, you know, it's kind of like a mini con just for the movie. They will have like people come in who worked on the film or something like that. Now, of course, in recent years, that's changed. The director just died last January. The only person that's really still around, I think, from the principal cast is Jane Seymour. Now, she was there last year as a surprise. But this has been, yeah, they usually do like a con. They do a screening of the movie there. They have stones with plaques around the property where they filmed different scenes. And then, you know, and then they usually end it with like a with, you know, a 1912 ball or something. So it's, you know, it's a big enough deal that people still kind of flock to this place. There was even an article that I'd found for like from a travel website in Australia talking about this experience. So it was big enough to develop its fan base. And like I said, it was only a few years afterwards. So it wasn't like, you know, oh, you know, with the 20 years time period, you know, we've grown fondness of it. It's like, I do think I think you're absolutely right when you say that maybe these people weren't necessarily reviewing this film in good faith, because like, that's the only explanation I can come up with. Like you said, it's not the greatest film ever, but you know, it's a serviceable romance. It's enjoyable. And you know, you're kind of,
to say it's horrible is what's wild to me.
I know. I would not say this is horrible.
Like, frankly, I am not the romance guy. This is not really my cup of tea. I enjoyed this. If someone wanted to put this on, I would not mind. I actually thought it was very fun to watch. And that actually sounds awesome. I would go to that. And they should keep it going. Just, even if everyone involved with the film is dead.
Yeah.
I think just having like a fun Dapper Day time period with a ball, like that would get me to buy a ticket to the hotel just as a movie fan.
Right.
And one thing it has going for it that the Bridgerton ball doesn't is that this one's real.
Right.
They've actually put on some successful somewhere in time balls, but they
I remember that drama. This Bridgerton ball was a mess. There are successful ones out there, but I know exactly the one you're talking about. Oh God. That was wild.
Ironically, the one I'm talking about was also in Michigan, so
oh my God.
It was in Detroit, if I'm remembering correctly, so that's hilarious on its own. It's like, oh, you went to the Bridgerton ball? Well, that's unfortunate. I went to the Grand Hotel for the My Heart Goes On ball, and ours actually went off without a problem.
Come to the Somewhere in Time ball. It actually happens.
I would go to it. Honestly, like if we were going to do something to actually have something to put on our Instagram, I would fly out and especially like stay at the hotel. I don't know how pricey it is these days, but I would do that. I would buy a stupid looking suit with a bowler hat. Just do the whole thing.
By the way, I love when he gets his outfit in the movie and she's like, yeah, that's out of date.
Right? Well, geez. Okay, so let's talk about the ending. So
okay.
Part of the reason I actually like this movie is, and part of the reason I also will, in my opinion, it does earn its sappiness. So, everyone who listens to the show, if this is like the first episode, we always encourage that you watch the movie that we're talking about because we're spoiling the hell out of it, but, it makes some things easier. But in case for some reason you've gotten this far and you still haven't seen this movie, the ending is one of the most gut-punching things I have ever seen. I was not expecting it.
Good.
Even though I had seen like I had seen a parody of this or whatever, like I could not have guessed. I kind of had a feeling it probably was not going to end happily ever after, but so what happens is that, they have their night together and they're, talking about their future and whatever. And, the subject comes out about his like stupid looking suit, which I do love that too, that it's out of date by like 12 years. And he looks silly in it too. Like he looks like a fish out of water. Like well before that, like you think like, oh, this suit looks stupid, but oh, everyone looks stupid at the time. And then when he goes back in time, it's like, oh no, he still looks stupid in the suit.
Yeah.
But so he's like digging through his pockets and he finds a penny with 1979 on it. And I was shocked partly because he actually did go through his change earlier in the movie. So that was wild to me that he still missed something.
Yeah.
But as the rules are stated earlier in the movie, you cannot have anything out of date on you because that won't make sense and that'll throw you off and you'll be, thrown back into your own time, as well as having lots of your energy drained from the travel through time. So that happens, and the soundtrack is really highly rated in this, but the sound design for that scene, there's like a musical sting that happens when he sees the penny. It's like a deep, like low note on the piano or something. That mixed with like the sound of him getting sucked back into 1980, along with the screams, it's genuinely like scary.
Yeah.
Like that whole sequence is horrifying. And it ends on such like a dark note too, because then when he gets back to his own time, it's just him desperately trying to get back and he can't. And so he like starves himself to death, and that's the movie, folks. And it ends, they're like reunited in heaven. So it has that kind of happiness to it, but like you're taken back to the beginning of the film, and that is creepy on its own too. Like, you know what kind of movie you're getting into, but just the way she approaches him and is like, come back to me. Like, even knowing that they're going to be lovers later in the movie, that just creeps me out. You know, like, you know what I mean? Like, not even that she's creepy because she's older, but like just that whole I haven't met you yet kind of thing. Like, that's creepy. But like going back to knowing that like those screams were the last she ever saw of him, and going back earlier in the film, you hear like she never acted again. She basically, like, her life stopped after that moment. And then going to the very beginning of the film where she sees him for the first time, like, it just has such a it's a tragedy.
Yeah.
And it earns it so well. Like, it makes, that's why the sappiness, I feel like, is earned.
Yeah.
Because if the film was just like a sappy romp through time and like they end up together and they get married and they like, I feel like if that were the case, then yes, it would be a horrible Lifetime tier crappy movie.
Yeah.
But like the fact that it is not just happy-go-lucky for the whole thing, and frankly sticks the landing so well, that is, again, genuinely, like, if I were teaching like a sound design course, I would play that sequence, because it is horror. It's not a scary movie, but like that scene is scary.
No, yeah, that's horrifying. And then like I said, he does try to get back, and then we just cut to the scene of him just like motionless, and he has like the like most like tear dried out eyes ever, and he's just blankly staring, and they come into his room and like, oh my god, he's basically almost dead, let's get some help, and he just dies right there because he's just so, you know, overcome or depressed or whatever. It's like, it's you thought like you, because you want him to, you want it to be like, oh, he'll get back, which, you know, they don't do, but that you like expect him to just to be like super depressed, or maybe he writes a play about it, but then it's just like, if you said, it's like that sucker punch of the, and then he just starves himself to death. Oh my god, you just, yeah, it's like, if you don't feel anything at all, there's something wrong with you.
You know why he died right then and there, T?
Because he couldn't.
It's because he saw the coroner's report from the future saying that he would die in that very moment.
Oh my god. Went to the future. Yeah, oh god, no, you're so right. That ending, it lands it so well. I know exactly what you're talking about with that sound design. It was done so perfectly. But, and I love, though, my favorite part is I love the fact that you weren't able to guess what was going to happen. I mean, like, you like know it's either going to be sappy or it's not going to work out somehow. But like you said, the way it happened, it happened so suddenly too. Like,
yeah,
it's like
no,
mid-scene.
I had it, like,
it's not like, oh, I have until, you know, midnight, you know, or anything like that.
Yeah,
it's like mid-scene.
well, it's so
they're
sudden.
mid-conversation, mid-sentence. Oh my god,
it's so sudden. And again, like, I suspected it was not going to be like they end up together, but I was not expecting. I mean, you kind of, the other thing I like about this, every time travel movie has the paradox, right?
Yeah.
Like, what started this whole thing? And their whole relationship is a paradox. And frankly, their whole relationship gives away the fact they're not going to be together.
right?
Because her coming to him at the beginning, it's like him checking the registry, right?
Right.
It's like you know you made it, but also the whole reason you know anything about this woman is because she came to you after 70 years or whatever of not seeing you. So you don't end up together. Like, it's, but then he's like compelled to go, right? Like, it's this causality loop is what they'll call it, you know? Like, who started the chain of events? Was it her coming to him? Was it him going back in time? Like, it's one of those things that's like a logical paradox that if you think too hard about it, it makes no sense.
Right.
You know, as a gamer, it reminds me of Song of Storms from Legend of Zelda, because, you know, Link learns it from someone who taught it to him.
Right.
So then it creates this spooky thing of like, well, then who wrote the song?
Right.
Same thing with this. And that's another thing I like about it that makes it kind of spooky. And again, it's the reason why I feel like fate is a big theme in this, and why I ignore the whole love at first sight stuff that usually irritates me. Because that is the point of the story. Like, everything about this whole relationship is screwed up from the get-go.
Yeah.
It shouldn't exist. The fact it does happen is a mystery because it doesn't make sense who would have caused it. And the fact that it was caused is what sort of hints to you that it's going to be a failure in the end.
Yeah.
It's especially like that too, finding out that she died the night that she saw him. It's like, okay, well, again, like based on your own logic of like, well, if you're in the registry, you went back. If you never reunited with her since she died,
she wouldn't have given
it's
you.
Not going to happen.
Yeah, she also wouldn't have given you the watch.
It's not going to happen.
Yeah,
yeah. So it's like it's one of those things, and the fact he wasn't able to figure that out, it's like he's compelled to do it because it has to happen for her to have given him the watch.
Right, and I think that's the whole point of that scene in the attic. It's like he needed reassurance that this is supposed to happen. Exactly.
So one other thing I thought about, and I wonder if you have thought of this over the years, because I'm guessing you've grew up with this movie.
Yes.
I take it most likely. So watching this, I was kind of amazed, and maybe you're going to surprise me. I was surprised. I don't think anyone has tried to remake this.
Right. Well,
so am I right? Has anyone tried
as
to?
Far as I know, no. Because when I was doing my research, I didn't see like, oh, this is like the first of so many adaptations. Like I Am Legend by the same guy was adapted 3 times.
Yeah. Yeah, it was the Omega Man, and then it was anyway.
Yeah. So as far as I know, this is the only adaptation of this. And just the way that directors and stuff do movies nowadays, we had this discussion back with Ghost. Is there seems to be they seem to have an issue with romance and stuff on screen unless it's sexual. Do you know what I mean? It's like sex first, but it's like where's the sensuality? Like we talked about this with Ghosts in the pottery scene, how sensual that is without being, obscene or not
a sex scene.
Oh yeah, it was sexy and everything. And the director said, and I'm so mad I didn't save this article, but he said in an article that there's not a lot of sex. He says there's not a lot of sex, or he said almost none. There's some, but it's like for a second and it happens behind a curtain. And he says, but there's so much love in this film, and I feel like that's something maybe a more modern director or people following would have a tough time towing, and I wonder if a remake wouldn't even work. Like it would be worse than like what they claimed was the first time. What do you think about that?
So to counter that, one of the things I was so impressed with Challengers last year is that it is smut without sex scenes.
Yeah.
It is a film about sex that has no sex scenes.
Right.
That has no nudity outside of like one random penis in a locker room scene that's not even a main character.
Right.
And you see Zendaya's ass for 2 seconds. I think the fact that did that and stuck the landing and did well at the box office is proof that you don't need to have weird 50 Shades of Grey scenes in your movie to get people excited. Who knows? Maybe book talk has rotted people's brains or something, but I really enjoyed Challengers, and I was very impressed with the fact that it maintained its sensuality without compromising by having a really graphic sex scene or something like that. So I think it's possible. And part of the reason this popped up into my head was the time periods and the fact that this is such an iconic movie. I'm surprised that Hollywood wouldn't be frothing at the mouth to remake it just for the easy money.
Right.
But also you could have fun updating stuff. So Disney remade Freaky Friday when you and I were kids,
right.
And they changed some things about it to make it a little more hip for the time period.
Right.
And I think you could do that with this, especially with it being a movie. Why don't, instead of 1912, what if it's 1939? What if she's a film actress? What if he, instead of seeing her portrait, sees a movie of her? And keep all the like same stuff with like, I like the whole meditative time travel thing, and I like it being set in a hotel and stuff. But like, I'm kind of surprised. I think you could do a solid remake of this, and I'm always harping on you need to quote unquote justify its existence. But I think by like making it set like today and setting the past, back then, maybe you could even do like a fun reverse Wizard of Oz thing where when he time travels, it's black and white.
Oh, that would be fun.
So like I was curious if you've ever had that thought, because when I was watching this, I was like, man, like I know this is like a classic movie in the romance genre. I am surprised there haven't been like 2 crappy remakes of it since then.
Right. We're looking at you, Arthur.
Because I think you could actually do a good remake of this and make it like, as good as the original, just change some things, maybe make some things a little less feel a little less hokey. I don't know. That was like a thought I had watching this, was just, I think it could be done really well.
So like you talked about, this is like the pop culture movie. This is very much, even like if people don't think it's good, it's a pop culture movie, it's a pop culture phenomenon. But where it did do well on its first release was they said it was in British Hong Kong.
What an interesting specific location.
Well, so they said this did so well over there that it played at the Palace Theater for 223 days. And think about, a year is 365 days, so it played there like almost the entire year. Or at least I think that's 2/3. But so that was like that was like a little interesting sort of little like blip, was that it blew up there on its original release. The other thing is we had a couple actors in this movie, either at the beginning of their career or basically when they were unknown, that played small bit parts in this movie. Only one of them we actually see, but they're both credited. So at the very beginning of the movie, one of the people he talks to at the cast thing is a critic. And that critic is played by a very, very young William Macy.
Yep. So, I noticed that in the credits, and I was wondering if it was the same William H. Macy.
Yeah, he's credited as W.H. Macy. I thought that was hilarious.
Yep.
So he was in there, and I looked it up. That was his second screen credit, was this role. I didn't see what his first one was, but if he was playing a nameless critic, I don't think it was anything big. And then the other one was George Wendt of Cheers fame, Norm from Cheers. He was very, very early in his career, and his scene was actually cut. But he ended up, and I found this out because I kept going back to where it was supposed to be, and I couldn't find him. I finally looked it up, and they said, yeah, his scene was cut, but he's still credited. But I thought that was pretty interesting. We got 2 people there, went on to be, major names in the industry, starting out here in this movie. So I just wanted to share those 2 little facts with you. But now that we're at this point, what are your final thoughts?
I mean, I think I've said pretty much all it's always tough because I always feel like I forget something. Like last episode, I think I kind of touched on it since I was tying Dracula to this, but It's like, I forgot to talk about how much I like the score and all this other stuff. Like the things that I really wanted to talk about were the penny scene and the sound design in that scene. The fact that I think that someone could make a really good remake of this.
Yeah.
And just, I think I'm pretty much
but
touched
I agree
on
that
just
it can
about
be done.
everything. Yeah, so I think I touched on pretty much everything. It's a short movie. Like, there's not a lot to talk about, unless you get, like, really in the weeds with, like, certain things that we were kind of getting on about in this episode. Going into this episode, I was going to give this a 2 out of 4. I think I might actually go up a little bit and give it a 2.5 out of 4. Yeah. Again, like, I can totally understand if the sappiness in the first, like, 3/4 of this is a little much, or if you feel like his infatuation with this woman he's never met is a little silly. Also, like, it's funny, I was kind of making fun of Keanu Reeves' acting in Dracula. Like, it's Christopher Reeves. Like, it doesn't matter. And he's been in tons of things and done a good job. He was Superman, yada yada. His acting, again, I think it's intentional because he's supposed to be kind of like dumb in love. But he is very like goofy and kind of comes off as sort of a bonehead in a lot of this. But not to the detriment of anything. But if you just like cannot stand like chick flicks, quote unquote, or like romantic stuff, like with me, I've said it before, I'll say it again, if it's done well or if it's good genuinely, I will like it. I'm not as heartless as I look or sound.
Yeah.
But I could see it being a sticking point with people. But otherwise, like, I think thematically it really is tight.
Yeah.
My biggest like critique of it is, as I said, I can't even put my finger on why precisely it feels this way.
Something
but there's a
feels
cheapness
cheap,
to it that and it feels like a TV movie production wise. And because of that, I'm not surprised it played really well on TV because it feels like it really would. So yeah, I think I'm going to settle with a 2.5 out of 4. But what about you?
I'm going to go ahead and give it a 3 out of 4 pitchers of sweet tea. I think this is a classic movie. I think, like we've talked about, it's one that has gone on to inspire other timeless trysts that have been acclaimed and everything. And I feel like it's one that people really need to see more. Jane Seymour. But that was an accident. But
as I said, it feels like it was the Notebook of its time. I feel like men hated this movie, but I feel like a lot of women really liked this. Just like the Notebook, that is also a bit of a hokey movie, and it's one that I don't think was critically panned quite as harshly as this one, but it's one of those movies where it's like, oh no, your ball and chain's dragging you to see the Notebook, isn't she? I could see this for the era it came out in being kind of the same thing.
Right. But the reason I said what I said is you talked previously about it's significant enough. There was essentially a whole episode of American Dad based around it. What bugs me is, I went back, the episode in reference is from season 6, not 7, season 6. And it's called Fart Break Hotel. Now, what bugs me is in reviews for this on the Wikipedia page, other problems it has, Rowan Kaiser of the AV Club reviewed it. They didn't give it a positive review. That's fine. But this is what bothers me. Is she said the side story featuring Steve traveling back to 1981 was clever, if not terribly original. It seemed to have elements of Hot Tub Time Machine and Back to the Future and probably some others I'm not remembering, and culminated in the anticlimax of Steve being the model and the painting so admired. Now, what bugged me about that is literally, as we've talked about, it was a parody of this, a direct parody of this movie. And this person who works for the AV Club, again, person who's storied, should be more storied and stuff, is not recognizing that. I'm not trying to criticize her. I'm just saying I don't think enough people see this, and she didn't pick up on that. And she's comparing it to other time travel movies. I think you need to be meaner. I think this is proof that you and I are better film critics than the whole staff of the AV Club. And that if you like the AV Club, you should listen to our show, because we actually know that Season 6, Episode 9 of American Dad, The Fart Break Hotel, is actually a clever homage to Somewhere in Time. Because that is what is embarrassing, if, in my opinion, is that this sounds like a young person. Like Hot Tub Time Machine? What are you talking about? Like, Jesus Christ. Like, and there you go. Like, I'm sounding a bit snobbish with that, but like, I feel like you need to see a lot of movies to talk about movies, and we are trying to be better about that ourselves. Yeah. I think one of the things that I really like about our podcast is that we come from different backgrounds and we have different taste. Yeah. And so many episodes, literally both of these episodes for this pairing in the Lonely Hearts Club, I had not seen I had not seen your movie, you had not seen my movie. So we are like learning as we're going. We love when that happens.
Which is fun. But my God, that's the movies she's bringing up. It's just painful. I'm like, are you 19 years old?
I know. I was like, I was gonna say, this is heartbreaking that she's not getting the parody. She's like, oh, it's just insert generic time travel movies, elements of that, maybe some not remembering, and then the ending's gonna climax.
The hot tub time machine is the thing where my jaw drops, because I'm just like, that movie is parroting other movies. Like, this is a... The Hot Tub Time Machine is a joke movie. What are you talking about? It is making fun of time travel movies. God damn. Like, it's, I don't know. Like, that makes me think that the AV Club is hiring, like, Gen Alpha people or something. Like, that's crazy to me. Again, like, I have not seen this movie, but even when I saw that, like, based on the year that episode of American Dad came out, I probably did see it when it aired. It was like 2010. I think I was like a senior in high school.
Yeah.
Might have even been just out of high school, depending on like when it aired. But like, I remembered the episode, and I had not seen this movie, but like, I had enough sense to guess, oh, this is probably like a parody of a movie I
right, like
seen.
It was such a specific plot that you're just like, this had to have been done somewhere, and this is a joke.
The fact that this critic on the AV Club can't just do the... How do you not know? Like, even if you haven't seen the movie, like, there's got to be fan forums and stuff talking about, you know, oh, this is a clear, like, joke of, you know, somewhere in time. Because it's again, it feels like lazy... I don't know. Who reviews a single episode of American Dad, for that matter?
It sounds like
what is going on?
It looks like she was doing like the whole block of episodes, like, because, you know, they did that because at this time it was like the Cleveland Show, it was Family Guy, and this is how long ago this was. It was like, she also reviewed as part of this, I think, the second episode of Bob's Burgers.
I'm gonna be a little nice too. Like, we started off this talking about the mean reviews this movie got and how people are just assigned things to review with period, you know, like if you work for the AV Club or the Rolling Stone or whatever, like if you're a film critic or a TV critic, they just say, hey, new episode of this show, write something about it, you got until tomorrow. So I'll be a little nice and be like, maybe it's one of those situations where it's like, here, just review all the Seth MacFarlane crap that came out yesterday. Like, what do you think? So, I don't know. But that is shocking to me that those are the references that she thought of.
I was just like, oh my God. Like, that broke my heart so much. Like, I wasn't upset she didn't like the episode. You know, that's for whatever. That's, you know, whatever, you know, they feel is good. But the fact that she just didn't understand one of the main plots of the show because she'd never seen... that, to me, that was just the most upsetting thing I have ever read. Not I've read, but this week I'd read on the internet. Let's just leave it, you know, at that.
Kids these days, am I right?
Oh my God.
What do you think? Are we the best movie critics these days? Do you think our podcast is better than the AV Club? Let us know in the comments if you're listening to this on YouTube Music. Or, you know, on our socials. I don't even know what they are anymore because the world is on fire and I don't know where we post things. But we do have a backlog of episodes. Definitely check them out, especially if you're curious why we keep bringing up Dracula. Just listen to our previous episode. But we will be back with a whole new special pairing of films for the next month. But until then, I've been Whiskey.
I've been Sweet Tea.
Keeping it Kino.
And suck it, Scorsese.
All right, peace, guys. See ya for some March Madness.
We will see y'all somewhere in time.
Bye.
Reels on the Rocks is a production of La Prince Laboratories. It is edited and produced by Alejandro Castillo and programmed by Jamie King. Original music is provided by Pat Mars and original artwork by Asa Esparza.